Okay, so what I wanted to show you was how to change some of the menu items to maybe make recording in certain situations a little bit easier. So first thing, and let's see if I can do this without covering up too much of the screen, is go to the menu button. In menu, most of what we're going to change is going to be in camera and mic, image quality, setup. So those are going to be the three menus that we go through. Let's start with camera and mic, as most of the settings that you'd want to change will be in there. Alright, so this is the first thing that you see here is white balance, and although this is a very important topic, we're only going to spend just a little bit of time here, in that to say most of the time the camera will do a perfectly acceptable job and you'll leave it in auto, but there is an outdoor, an indoor, and then a touch focus. I am recording this indoors on my little corner of the desk, which is why the indoor setting matches very closely to the auto setting. It does a really good job in my experience. Once you have the setting you want, click OK, and you can get out of that. Alright, back to menu, camera. So probably the most interesting feature in here is going to be spot focus, although it is on. I'll show you how that works in a minute with the three little characters we have laid out on my desk. We'll leave that on for what we're doing right now. Sometimes you notice that the menu itself doesn't actually change or kick you back to the camera view, so you don't always have to hit menu to get back. Let's take a look at a couple of the other options here. Exposure is a huge topic, and we'll definitely go over that and what you may want to adjust on this camera when we get to that in the class. One of the things that may be tempting is this low lux setting here, which would theoretically improve performance in low light situations. Leave that off. It generally makes the scene look brighter, and if you're in a dark place, you probably want it to look darker. But there is a time and place for that, so that may be interesting. Let's continue through. Scene selection is a weird Sony thing. Other camera manufacturers do this. Leave it in auto. None of the scene selections are actually any good for most of what we will do. But if you're looking in here, there's night, and then there's sunset and flowers and things like that, and it's all pretty much useless. Cinematone attempts to emulate the color and atmosphere of film recording. Leave that off. We want television look. Fader fades in and out all of your shots. Leave that off. That's a terrible feature. Self-timer only applies for photo mode, really. If you're using this for photos, I suggest you get a better camera. So same with telemacro. It's basically going to zoom in and blur out the background. Not necessary. Steady shot you definitely want on. Okay, and probably active is the best way to do this. It's going to help remove some of the camera shake, especially because these are tiny, tiny cameras and not going to be mounted on the shoulder. This will help a lot. Okay, huge disclaimer here. Digital zoom needs to stay off on all your cameras. Digital zoom is one of the worst things that you could do. Know that it's here if you need it in a pinch, but is almost in every case a very, very bad idea. Don't turn it on. Okay. We'll keep going down. After digital zoom, we get conversion lens. Doesn't apply because we don't have one. Auto backlight, if you're in a situation where your scene is backlit, which we'll talk about later in the class as well, you want this on. Continuing through. Face detection, smile shutter, all of those leave the way they are. It's sort of hokey, but apparently if you smile in front of this camera, it'll automatically take a picture. Or could if you configure it that way. Flash and flash level and red eye reduction only apply to photos. We'll continue down. And here we go with some more interesting recording settings. Closer voice is one that we may want to experiment with. This requires face detection to be on, of course, so if we were to go back up and enable that, the idea, at least according to the manual, is that when that's on, the closest voice, and it's going to measure the distance from the camera to the lens, and from the camera to the subject rather, and determine who's speaking. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how well that'll work, but that is something interesting to know about and have in your tool bag, especially since we're using these cameras. Built-in zoom mic. This is also interesting in that when you zoom the camera in or further away, the mic will become more focused or less focused depending upon your zoom level. Auto wind noise reduction. Probably want that off, as we don't want the camera doing anything we don't expect it to be doing, but know that if you're in a windy situation, this is here for you. Alright, back into the menu because that setting kicked us out. Nice that it leaves off where we are. Audio mode. This is an important one. Although these cameras will record what they call 5.1 surround, we don't need that or want it, at least not for what we're doing, so we're going to change this to 2-channel stereo, and it makes our files just a little bit smaller. Okay, let's keep going. Now we got that menu kicked us out. I'm going to just show you the difference here. Earlier, all 5 of these were peaking, and now if I'm on the left side, only the left side is strongest, and if I switch to the right side, now the right side is stronger. But earlier, all of these were going, and these are your mic level indicators. So this, if you're not hearing sound or hearing what you're expecting, you know, this may be off, or you may configure the camera in such a way that it's not recording sound. That could be, and especially if you're not seeing anything here, you'd want to go in and check and make sure your mic input is set correctly. Menu. Camera and mic, we're not done with this yet, so let's keep going down. Mic reference level. If you are using headphones, which I do suggest, and we'll talk about that too, you can go ahead and adjust the sensitivity of the microphone, and you can monitor that using the headphone jack, which I'll show you in a bit. Let's keep going down. We're almost through this. My button allows you to configure a particular button for your image. Guide frame is what we talked about. This is today's, at least, lecture, and it allows you to turn on a rule of thirds, and I leave that on all the time. And okay, now see, we have our nice rule of thirds there. Okay, back into menu because that one kicks us out. And this time, let's go down a little bit. So guide frame, display setting should, let's see, what did I say about display setting? Display setting sets the icons on the menus to come on and off as automatically. Generally leave this on auto so your screen gets a little free of distracting icons. You could turn it on so that they stay on permanently. The icons that I'm referring to are these ones here. These will stay on, and then see they shut off at some point so that you could have a little bit more focused display. So back into camera and mic. We talked about zebra stripes in class. That is always a good one to turn on. So there are 2 settings. If it's not off, you could have 70, which will tell you when you've reached 70% of your brightness. And in video production, notice that's measured in IRE. So that identifies areas that are potentially exposed brighter than 70% of what they should be. And what happens is if it gets too bright, you lose detail in the image. So at the very least, have it on 100 and then it identifies areas that are completely overexposed, brighter than 100% essentially of what could be recorded for a brightness value, and these areas will be all white. Now, if they are white in the scene, as they are for this little toadstool here, and this guy's eyes and fangs, and Mario's fangs, well then that's normal. And you wouldn't worry about it too much, although you are losing detail, so you'd either dim the lights or something like that. But 70 generally gives you a good indicator of the areas that could be overexposed and gives you a little extra room. So the areas that are 70, it is still recording some information and tells you about it. So I usually leave mine on 70, best to catch it before it gets too bad. Hit OK, that'll be applied. Now we see our zebra stripes and our rule of thirds. Back into menu. We're almost done going through the camera and mic menu. Scroll down to the next one. Peaking is a good one. This is going to allow you to see what the camera is setting in focus, and that's very difficult to do for humans, especially in colored imagery. And black and white, turns out we can tell a lot more about it than in color. You could have 3 different colors, so you could have white, where it will auto highlight edges that are in focus in white, red, or yellow. And you want to adjust this by the scene. Now we have a lot of red here, so that probably doesn't tell us much about it. We would probably choose yellow or white for something like this. And I'm going to go with yellow. It'll be a little bit easier to see in our setup. So we can see that there is no yellow on or around the toadstool, meaning it is slightly out of focus. Everything else back here, it's able to identify some contrasting areas and say for sure that's in focus. And that's what is being highlighted. Okay.